Hey folks, Garden Coach Deb here with Prior Unity Garden. Another thing to consider when dealing with extreme heat in your garden or growing things that are going to be happier dealing with the heat than things that are not. So some of this may be obvious. For example, you don't grow cool weather crops in the summertime. So examples of that would be like a lot of your cold crops. For broccolis and cauliflowers, they don't like the heat. Cilantro doesn't like the heat. A lot of cabbages aren't real crazy about the heat either. So you would want to harvest the cool-loving crops before you're going to get into the extreme heat of summer. If you want more of these crops, consider fall gardening. There are some spring crops that can handle heat better than others. For example, spinach is done by 75. It just does not like the heat very well. Whereas other things, some of the kales are so hardy, they can continue to grow in the summer heat as well as the freezing cold of wintertime. So an important and fun way to deal with extreme heat is choosing different varieties that are going to do well in the heat, or at least have a higher success rate. So when you're planting your garden, it's nice to choose different varieties, some that like it cool, some that like it hot. And also consider planting things that don't mind the heat so much. For example, peppers and chilies don't seem to mind the heat. They do pretty darn well. Eggplants likewise tend to do fairly well in summer's heat. Other plants that don't mind the heat so much are going to be like pumpkins, so your winter squashes, your corn, and your melons. Something to know though, we were talking about watering. Melons like a lot of water, and so do corn. They're both really like to have, they like it hot, but they also like to have a good water source. So something to consider when you're planning your garden and choosing what varieties and what things that you want to put where. If you love beans, consider more dry beans in case it gets really hot. Good Mother Stollard is a fantastic sort of traditional dry bean that you can do the Three Sisters with and have that go up your corn. Other beans to consider are those that you can eat in the green or fresh stage as well as the dried stage. So for instance, you could put in dragon tongue or black turtle, which are both heirloom beans, and eat them in the fresh stage. But if all of a sudden you get this extreme heat and you don't want to be watering all the time, you can just leave them out there on the vine to become dry beans that you can use for soup in the cold winter months. Tomatillos are also another heat-loving crop, whether you're growing the ones to make green salsa or like the pineapple kind that are more like a snacking fruit for the kids. Our favorite variety of tomato for summer's heat is going to be Thessaloniki. This particular variety was bred in Greece for the hot Greek Isles, and it does really well in just really hot weather. When we've had some baking hot spells in the past and all the other tomatoes are just done, there's Thessaloniki out there just pumping out those tomatoes. So that's another thing to look at when you're looking at your seed catalogs, is to consider and look at the descriptions of if something is considered heat tolerant. Another example of that, now lettuces are tough in the heat, but there are some varieties that are going to do better. For example, Jericho romaine was bred for the hot deserts of Israel, and we found it does pretty darn well in the heat for lettuce. Other plants that grow well in the heat are what I call the Mediterranean herbs. Think about things that are baking on a hot Mediterranean hillside, like your oreganos and your marjorams and your thymes. There's also some wonderful companion plants that like the heat, like your classic marigolds and basil companion plants. So again, when you're thinking about preparing for extreme heat, this is another aspect to consider.